It is a first down. Pirates.
You can paint this one purple. What an incredible win by the ECU Pirates.
Welcome into Blackbeard's Alley, a Pirate football podcast presented by L&K Custom Homes. More about them a little bit later in the show. I appreciate the loyal support of former East Carolina defensive back from the 1983 team, Kevin Walker. But East Carolina victorious over Campbell, and the Pirates did exactly what you would hope they would do against such an opponent. 56-3 winners on Saturday night, and right now to break it down from a variety of angles, very excited to welcome back my co-host, Jason Tyndall. Jason, how are you?
Hey, Bubba, I'm doing well. Thanks, man. It's always a good Sunday to get together after a big victory like the Pirates had last night and there in Daddy-Ficklin.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing earlier, especially both of us. There's something different. Be it a Saturday or a Sunday, whatever the day is. So, after a win, that folks who haven't played and coached, it's tough to explain to them that feeling. So much work goes into it. But going into this game, after the heartbreaking loss at NC State, 24-17, the Pirates really got off to a slow start in that one against the Wolfpack. And with that being the case, I wanted to correct that moving into the Campbell game. Able to do just that, scoring a lot early, leading 35-3 at halftime. However, ECU was penalized an awful lot in this game as they were against NC State. The run game, minimal improvement, still a long ways to go there, especially running between the tackles. And then the Pirates were able to force 2 turnovers against the Camels.
Yeah, absolutely. It's coming off the NC State game. If you go back and really watch the replay, there's a handful of plays that really probably escalated the slow start for us. And I know that the coaching staff would love to have that first quarter back. One of the things that we talked about offline, Bubba, that I think is important is over the years as Pirate fans, we've had these games coming up on the schedule a lot with FCS schools, and we had nail biters and, really close calls like for Charleston Southerns, for example, or UCFs back before they were 1A with Dante Culpepper, for example, where, we're still kind of grinding our teeth in the fourth quarter. And yesterday it was a very professional looking input from the team as far as their intensity and getting off to that fast start and really just throwing the daggers at the Camels out of the gate. So it's just pleasing to sit through the game and enjoy the game and not have that stress and watch so many young Pirates that most of us haven't seen really in live action get a chance to get some snaps too. So great job by Coach Harrell and staff and wonderful job by the players.
Yeah, Pirates came out, elected to receive after winning the toss and went right down the field. Got the tight ends involved early. The passing game was really sharp. Caton Hauser throwing for over 300 yards for a second straight game, picking up where he left off last season. 15 different guys, Jason, caught passes yesterday. And I gave you credit. Created a little short on our YouTube channel throughout the week and shared it on social media, also on Instagram and X. But what you said about Brock Spalding, it's certainly coming true through 2 games.
Yeah, it feels like Brock's been here about 5 years now. So it's, he's paid his dues. He's a hard worker, obviously. He's one of those guys that, you hate to compare Brock to like a Wes Welker, et cetera, but he just runs really good routes and seems to have great cuts and gets out of his cuts quickly and gets open. And I know in the past he had a little bit of problem with some dropsies and things like that, but I'm excited about Brock, but I'm also excited about In fact, I think it might be a school record, Bubba, that they actually had 15 different receivers catch a ball. And if you think about the quarterbacks and receiving groups we've had over the years, from the Logan years and obviously Bill Lewis before that with the Peach Bowl team, but all the way through Ruffin McNeil and the air raid with Lincoln Riley, the fact that we might have broke a school record yesterday, I don't care who the opponent is. And the only outcome from that's impact, for us is it creates a vibe in that locker room that there's so many playmakers and gives those other players a chance to put their hands on the ball and make a catch. It's going to be a positive, it's going to be a positive future force, I feel like, in that skill position in room and for the offense.
Yeah, no doubt. You had 8 different guys register a carry, and actually TJ Engelman ended up leading the Pirates with, I think, something like 36 or 37 yards rushing. So that shows you what a part of that was just obviously the blowout win and seeing a lot of guys get playing time. But Engelman had 35, 36, 37 yards, somewhere in there. And then the same for guys like Montgomery and Parker Jenkins.
Yeah. And honestly, when you say that and those guys are starting to get the carries, one of the things that, just like the receivers, having the running backs, when you see them running behind, with their low pads, running behind their pads, fighting for extra yards, making good cuts, that's only going to help the development of this offensive line. And I feel like as the year moves forward and progresses, our offensive line is going to really just continue to gel, and they'll find the right combination up there. I really feel like Coach Maddox is a high-end offensive line coach. And so they're still feeling their way out. And luckily having that Campbell game, lesser opponent, gives us a chance to move folks around and, which then correlates to the success of the running game for the running backs. And I just think as the year, progresses, we'll see a lot of maturity from not just the running back side of the room, but also the offensive line room.
That ground attack, it turned out 172 yards, but it's like I was commenting to my dad and a few folks sitting around me at the game, until Parker Jenkins had that 17-yard down run there. I guess late second quarter. To that point, I think we'd either had one or no runs over 5 yards.
Yeah, I mean, give some credit to Campbell. We talked about this off air as well. When you look at the rosters now, and you go, you're researching the team that we're playing next or in 2 weeks, and you start looking at the rosters and you look at where they played before. It's not Wilson Hunt High School and Campbell. It's Wilson Hunt High School, Virginia Tech, Coastal Carolina, and Campbell. So these, a lot of their players on defense specifically have played a lot of, big time snaps in high end, Division I college football. So I think we have to give them some credit, and also just think it's just a evolving, maturing process with the running game with ECU, and it really makes a lot of us appreciate even more what Rajay Harris did for us his last year and a half when he became that bell cow top running back for us that we all knew we could count on, and not only in pass protection but also running the ball and catching the ball out of the backfield.
Caden Hauser, as I mentioned in the open, he threw for over 300 yards for his second straight game, and pretty sharp. There were a few throws that got away. I remember maybe a quick out. He airmailed it, and then right around that same time made an errant throw or two. But the thing I love about Caden, he has a short memory. He's completely in control, and right after that, he bounced back with several, very accurate throws that were right on the money.
Yeah, we're lucky to have Caden. I'll just leave it at that. Most of our fans can recognize the fact that he's cool, calm, and collective in the pocket. He obviously has command of the offense. I think he's going to wind up being one of those Pirate quarterbacks when it's all said and done, when he's finished, that we talk about for years and years. The guy just gets it. and you can tell his teammates, they all believe in having Caton as the number one guy. And that's not just on the offensive side, but you continue to hear the defensive players talk about their trust in Caton as a leader, but also the quarterback and the general of that offense.
As far as the ground game, you were kind of going in this direction, and you provided a little detail a moment ago. But, with your coaching background, if you would elaborate a little, what's going on there and what you've seen as far as the continuity and just how it takes time, and you have to have those live bullets to see guys come together and develop that playing, as Coach Ruff used to always say, as a nickel as opposed to 5 pennies.
Yeah, that's actually a really good way to put it by Coach Ruff. And doesn't surprise me. He's the one that said that. But they have to work together, and the communication is so key, and be able to adjust the blocking concept at the line of scrimmage, especially as fast as we snap the football. That's not something you can just plug and play a bunch of people into and roll out numerous different Pirates during the game, because it's not like Coach Tesh on defense where he can roll out 3 and 4 D linemen every couple plays. You see them doing their very specific substitute pattern and pace. On offensive line, it comes down to all 5 of those guys gelling together, having a bond, and then if there's 6, 7, or 8, so if you got 3 other backups across the front, they've all got to be able to work together as a tandem. It's I used to tell my players when I was coaching, it's like dancing with the stars. You can dance, she can dance, but if you can't dance well together, it's not dancing with the stars. And for those offensive linemen, it's working together, understanding how they're going to, as a defense is adjusting, as a play is being called, as the cadence is starting, are we all on the same page? Are we going to have good leverage and good angles? And it's just going to take time. We've moved a bunch of people around. We got some new faces up there, and we had an injury at center early in camp. Really set us back a little bit. But I just feel like the vibe of this program with Coach Harrell being in charge resonates with all the position groups, and maybe none as the year progresses more than the offensive line, because it's just the way that the program's heading under his leadership, which will carry over to the success of us up front on offense.
Kind of along those lines about Coach Harrell's rapport with the different position groups, it's been well documented in how he made a very intentional effort throughout the end of last season after getting the job on an interim basis. And then, of course, once having that interim tag removed, how he developed that relationship more with Caton Hauser. And he was joking, saying last night that there in the third quarter, right before Caton Hauser was pulled from the game, that he made him a little nervous, pulling it when, yes, he made the correct read, but he wanted to just hand the ball off. And he said, I could have gone out there and tackled him. I know you heard those post-game comments.
Yeah. And honestly, he says that, and it's really good, for a good laugh at the post-game presser, especially after a win like that. But every coach in the country would tell you they'd like to have a guy like Caton Hauser who would still do that. They're a gamer. They're not just the show up. They don't just show up. They bring the lunch pail, and they're going to win and compete. And I had the same situation as a high school coach with an option quarterback. And sometimes it would drive me crazy, and I would, kind of lose my wits about myself. And one of my veteran assistant coaches would say, would you rather have him doing that or somebody who's not willing to do that? And I'd say, I'd rather have him. They're like, okay, then shut up and let him play. And I know Coach Harrell, just from knowing him from years ago, he loves the fact that Caton's that competitive, even when the game's out of hand. But you also get nervous about a silly injury or things like that from pulling it and keeping it.
A critical element of this offense is the variety of ways in which John David Baker and staff utilize our tight ends. We're very blessed to have a few talented guys in that room. first and foremost, Cesario Riles and Javante Connor. And those guys really produced against NC State, but even more so perhaps last night. Riles getting in the end zone, I think our first touchdown of the game. And he really had a nice night. I think he left the game with an injury, if I'm not mistaken. But talk about what you've seen from Cesario Riles and also Javante Connor and the many hats that they wear.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that comes to mind is their matchup issue for the opposing team's defensive coordinator. They're very athletic. They've got really good size. One of the things I was watching yesterday was just how they run their routes, but also how they can play in space and use their body to create advantages or angles. And we're very lucky to have both of those guys. And I feel like our tight end room's deeper, even past Javante, going into, the other guys that are in that room. So I feel like we're going to have a really deep, a good chance to have a lot of production out of the Y position this fall. I think the main piece would be just, can they continue working their pad level and blocking on the perimeter? And that's one thing that can really help the running game to pop some more, 16, 17, 25-yard runs when the Y position, the tight end's able to get out and create issues with edge players or flat defenders or whatever it might be. That nickel type, bandit type spur that's out there in college football now. And then, that also then sets up a good opportunity for play action pass off of that, kind of like what Navy does with their slot backs.
Yeah, we saw J.C. Connor's athleticism on that 79-yard catch and run against NC State last week in the second quarter. And to give you an idea, I don't know that we'll see this a lot, but it's an option. And when you're struggling to run between the tackles, it's nice to have a variety of guys that you can hand the ball on a jet sweep. And last night, a time or two, Connor did just that.
Yeah, that's a nightmare. I'll just leave it at that. I'm glad I'm not a defensive coordinator with a guy of his size and ability to run is getting the ball at, 3/4 to full speed already. And if you get some sort of cross block out there with the Z and the X or whoever's out there on the perimeter, now you've got, again, it goes back to angles. You've got to ask guys to do inhumane things and play off a block when somebody else has already got leverage on them with a 245 to 55 pound, 6'4" human being who can run very well. Is carrying the football at you. So that puts yourself in a little conflict resolution scenario.
I mentioned how 15 different guys called passes. What stood out to you, from the passing game, specifically from those variety of receivers that they caught balls last night?
Well, the route running looks really, obviously it's Campbell. Let's just, peel the onion back again on that. But the route running, how they're getting out of their breaks looks really well. But you also have to step back and go, our quarterbacks are doing a good job of moving in the pocket a little bit and keeping their eyes downfield and allowing those routes to progress or to make adjustments on the fly and then making good, clean, throws. That goes back to a testament of the offensive line as well. But I just think the receivers are I think they're dialed in with Caton. I mean, it just seems to be like a symphony that plays the right music at the right time and the right notes.
Let's shift over and take a look at the defense. We found out late in the week that Xavier McIver, I believe he was missing the game and will probably miss 3 or 4 weeks with the meniscus. Is that right? And then I saw Zion Wilson hobble off. And so first, any information that you have there, and then just talk about the play of the defense, limiting Campbell to just 4 net rushing yards. And outside of that one drive where the Pirates allowed a 19-play, 85-yard drive that fortunately just ended in a field goal, we were able to rebound and assert our dominance from that point on.
Yeah, so we were just 2 steps faster than them on defense compared to offensive personnel. One of the things, again, not to sound repetitive, but you and I talked about this earlier, was their tenacious effort in pursuit and getting off blocks quickly. Again, it's a FCS opponent. That should happen, but we've watched that not happen for years and years at East Carolina for some reason. And for once, we did dominate. And there was a 2-step in speed difference between their offense personnel and our defense personnel. And I was just really impressed with how quickly we closed and covered ground defensively from the linebacker position. But also, if you look at I call them the big uglies up front, they're just eating up blocks and sucking up blocks so that other guys can run free and use their speed and their athleticism to make plays. And I just like the offensive line, I would put good money on a bet that as the year progresses, our back 5 on the defense in secondary will also become a key component to a big year for us in Greenville, East Carolina.
Yep, no doubt. Because I definitely like what I see. And granted, like we've stated a couple times, you got to keep the opponent in mind. But against NC State, we limited them to right around 100 rushing yards. And I think I saw that Hollywood Smothers yesterday against UVA, ran for like 140, 145.
Yeah, he did. I think it's like 156 or something. I could be wrong, but I know, and it just gives you perspective. Even with 2 returning starters on defense, the great job that coaching staff's done, Coach Aldridge and everybody else on the staff, Mags, and you name them, and Tesh. We've got a pretty good defense. Clean up some things on the back end, clean up some missed tackles with over pursuit, which I'd rather have over pursuit than under pursuit, and continue to develop quality depth up front. So the hockey lines of Coach Tesh, he can just run those guys on and off. So we have fresh, big bodies, sucking up blocks and eating up space. One of the things that with Xavier going out, and I don't know what the situation with Zion is, we're going to have to be proactive in keeping these guys healthy and fresh. And that's one of the keys, I think, that Coach Harrell has brought to the program is that mindset of, let's not try to win the game on Tuesday in practice. Let's win on Saturday, or hell, why do we play like 48 Thursday night games this year? It feels like the conference screwed us again with our scheduling, but neither here nor there. But keep them fresh so that they win the game whatever day that game takes place, as opposed to just beating them up in practice and, actually developing some negative morale, which I've heard has happened in the past.
Teams, pretty interesting because Nick Massey performed well against NC State. Yes, he missed a 53-yarder, but it was dead on, just a few yards short, and then he converted a 34-yarder and looked very confident in doing so. And then the punting aspects, Ryan Levy punted well last night. Clearly, we did not have to punt until I think it was early fourth quarter, or perhaps late third. And so Thomas O'Halloran, the Aussie, taking over for Luke Lawson, he punted the ball well. Levy had 5 boots for, I think, an average of 42 per in the opener. So that aspect seems to be progressing nicely. And then how about Kyler Pearson? He showed his explosiveness to Oklahoma State transfer. And we may dive into just a little general college football talk later. And I know Kyler Pearson was glad to be in Greenville, North Carolina yesterday, as opposed to Eugene, Oregon, with what happened to Oregon State.
Yeah, I mean, wouldn't be an East Carolina podcast unless we talked about kind of the special teams in some regards, considering our history. But I will say something about the young Aussie punter who is, obviously probably had a connection with Luke Larson. Last season, I was down on the field for pregame warmups, and he was punting. And there's a few high school coaches who I knew who were standing around me as well, who were guests from the Pirates down there with some of their recruits. And we were all talking about the challenge it will be covering his punts. The height and the depth of the punt was going to be up. I mean, you've got to, you can outkick your coverage, as they say in old school football. And he was booming the ball. I mean, it was impressive. I stopped paying attention to all the other position groups and watching this guy going, holy hell, why are we not letting him punt right now? And I started going, okay, why would they not? Maybe we didn't have the personnel to cover fast enough. But it seems to be a mixed bag right now on the special teams as far as the kicking situation. It looks like they're trying to figure out which person is going to be the go-to with short field goals, long field goals. Obviously, PATs are super important. And then I like the little guy from Oklahoma State, the transfer that's returning kicks. He seems to just be so confident in just fielding the ball as opposed to maybe not taking one more step and just catching it as opposed to letting it hit and then roll 15 to 25 more yards, which we've seen in the past. So I feel like special teams, just like the offensive line and the secondary, is just going to continue to get better and better as the year progresses.
Yeah, well said. On our NC State recap show, I mentioned that to Mark Libiano. I said, Mark, a lot of people, given that it may have been all fair catches even against NC State, but I like Kyler Pearson's demeanor back there. Those who know what a solid punt returner looks like would know what I was talking about. There were times last year where you could tell we're certainly not going to call anyone out, but it was just a disaster. You like, oh gosh, it's going to be an adventure. We can't, with all the turnovers that we were committing offensively, that's the last thing we needed, another turnover to give a short field in the kicking game. But I think it was like 2004, 2005, maybe. Longtime Pirate fans will remember Travis Williams. I think he may have been the last Pirate to take a punt to the house. Do not be surprised. Kyler Pearson has that potential, and we may see it and see that 2-decade streak broken before the end of the year. What about any other aspects of the special teams on the kicking side of thing? I mentioned how we didn't see Mazzy, but we saw Andrew Conrad. Conrad converted 6 PATs, and then you had Noah Perez come in and convert a couple late in the game.
Yeah, I think that this was a good setting to give other folks a chance to kick live in the game. If anything, we might have too many kickers, and that's a good problem to have. You can never have too many good pitchers. You can never have too many good quarterbacks. You can never have too many good offensive linemen. But we have that in kicking right now. So I feel like the staff is still creating competition to see who's going to be the person that you can count on, when it comes for those big kicks against BYU or a big kick against UTSA, et cetera. Who's the person that is showing the most consistency, not only in practice, but also live in front of fans and with an opponent who's doing their best to stop and make the kick unsuccessful.
And then lastly, concerning the special teams, I believe it's Everett Scott's our kickoff specialist from Matthews, North Carolina, and Weddington High School. He's had 4 touchbacks against the Wolfpack and did a solid job again last night.
Yeah, again, it's this. If you go to an East Carolina football or athletics message board, I say, why are we kicking the ball to the 5? And it seems like now we've got a leg. Keep them healthy. Don't make them kick too much in practice, but where he can put that ball in the end zone, and you're minimizing the risk of a return, and you're just kind of setting your defense up for a good first down from the 25 or whatever it is now in college football, as opposed to having a return or a penalty or something like that puts the ball closer to that plus 50-yard line. Which creates an issue immediately for the defense, because now you're playing backed up against the into getting close to the red zone. But I'm kind of baffled, to be honest with you, that it's taken us this long to get somebody who can just knock that thing in the end zone. And I don't know if anybody noticed, Campbell's kicker was pretty damn good at that as well.
He was, and the first kickoff of the season against NC State, it went at least 2 or 3 yards past the end line. I thought, wow. I said that's been something that has been a long time coming. But if we communicate some of our final thoughts here on Saturday night in the 56-3 win over Campbell, and just the atmosphere at Dowdy-Ficklin, the number, the attendance number is 35,100. A little disappointing, just from the standpoint. I know I went back and checked last year against Norfolk State. It was 36-5. Clearly not nearly the momentum going into last season as there was this time around, and it wasn't Labor Day weekend, which I get sick of hearing that excuse. To each their own. But so yeah, a little disappointing that it wasn't more upper 30s, close to 40. But overall, the crowd that was there was excellent, just like Blake said in the postgame. And you had 10,000 students, 10,000 plus students there, and there you see what it looked like down in the Boneyard.
Yeah. I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's because of ESPN Plus and a lot of other factors involved. And, we had a run there where it's tough to be a Pirate fan in football. And some of that carryovers happened. I know I've got friends who were diehard season ticket holders who've not come back since before Mike was hired as head coach. They just don't come. They don't show up. And I don't know if I sit on, the tower side. So looking across before the upper deck, there was that whole section between that and the upper deck was kind of open. And it's disappointing that at least our lower bowl wasn't fully full. We got to figure out a way to do that. And I don't know if it's getting creative or what, but we should have had 40,000 people at that game. And we did not. And that's the one. If I'd say there was one thing negative about the night, I just felt like, we're starting to look for more excuses why not to show up as opposed to why we should show up. Even if you just drive in, go straight in the game, and turn around and drive home afterwards, we should be filling that stadium up. And we used to do that on a consistent basis, have almost full capacity crowds. And I just don't understand why it's not happening now with the momentum that Coach Harrell's created, the bowl win over NC State. And let's just call it like it is, Bubba, between the two of us and everybody in Pirate Nation. If that NC State game would have started out the way it did, a week and a half ago or whatever, 2 years ago, we would have lost that game 34-7, 34-10, 43-3. But this team just doesn't give up. They just continue to play hard regardless of the circumstances. And because of that, I feel like we owe those players and those coaches our full support. So if you can figure out a way to get to Dowdy-Ficklin or get down to Conway or wherever, do your best to get there. And I understand circumstances are different. Things change. My life changed last year. It was very fluid. And, I didn't have the same opportunities to do things that I used to do. But, figure out a way to get to Dowdy-Ficklin and also support those Pirate football players, because it makes a difference. And it makes it's a super impactful for those players in our program moving forward. And as the college landscape continues to change, we need to step up to a different level and create awareness across the country that somebody needs to grab East Carolina and put them in a conference that has a chance to be in the playoffs. If not, we're going to be complaining and bitching about the fact that we don't have a chance to play in the playoffs. And that's on us as fans and on us as a program as well. We're all a part of one Pirate Nation.
Speaking of Conway, that's where the Pirates are headed next and take on the Chanticleers. Chanticleers now 1-1. I think lost 48-7 in the opener up in Charlottesville at UVA in a game that was pretty much it went south quickly for the Chants that night in Charlottesville, and then last night led Charleston Southern, an FCS opponent, just 3-0. There early in the fourth quarter before winning 13-0. So, yes, they did pitch a shutout, but that's the Charleston Southern offense that struggled at Vandy and then clearly struggled last night, totaling just about 150 yards. But what are your thoughts on Tim Beck's team?
It's tricky. I think Virginia's a good football club this year. I said on our first podcast, this feels like a trap game to me. Because our players are going to look at it. They're college kids. They barely beat Charleston Southern. They got destroyed at Virginia. We should go in there and just beat them. And if they have that mindset, which I know the coaching staff is beating into them today, probably at practice, you better be ready to play. It's going to be a packed house. There's going to be a lot of Pirates there. Pirate Nation will show up at that game, but you better be ready to play. And all we have to do is throw a little bit of tape of that Charlotte game from last year to give them that bad taste in their mouth to realize that regardless of the stadium size, it's all about the opponent. And if you don't, a lot of us will remember that head scratcher, nail biter, stress fest we had against Charleston Southern just a few years ago in Dowdy-Ficklin in front of a big crowd. Now, we're a 6.5-point favorite right now, which means absolutely jack squat in my world. We have to come out this week and do the same things that we tried to do against Campbell and just attack, and be relentless, be aggressive, be the one that throws the first punch. Don't wait for them to do something and just try to start nailing nails in the coffin early on in that game. But I'm super nervous about this game. I really am. And just my former coach intuition and how people's psychology works. But we should go in there with a point to prove that we're going to just beat the hell out of them in Conway. And if we don't, it could get really interesting.
Critical game going into BYU. Keep them momentum going. Get to 2-1. Continue to refine things, and you kind of, I guess, to quote the great. I think this was when he was at Texas Tech blasting his 2009 team or 2010 team, just how it was a situation where they thought that they were owed something and that the points they had scored in a previous game or season, was going to amount to something the following week, kind of what you're saying. And that's basically the deal. How many of those 56 from last night count next week? Not a freaking the secret a little bit there. But taking a look at the American, and before we move on to our American scoreboard, I did want to mention that we'll catch up with Joe Katz. He's part of the Coastal Carolina broadcast team. We'll have Joe Katz for you probably tomorrow, being Monday, and get you ready for the Pirates and Shots. So 7:30 kickoff next Saturday night on ESPN Plus in Conway at Brooks Stadium. But how about the South Florida Bulls after beating Boise State 34-7 last week? They go into the Swamp and kick a 20-yard field goal in the game final play to win 18-16.
Yeah, it's a big win for the American. Just like Army upsetting Kansas State, big win for American. It gives us more credit, it gives us more stock, and as regards to college football playoff goes. Our conference is going to wind up being a really tough road down, as we progress through our schedule. But yeah, it's exciting to see us get those wins against those opponents that we're obviously not favored to beat. And it's always big to win in the Swamp. I've got a good friend of mine who's a huge Florida fan, and I tried to talk to him today about the game, and he just told me to pound sand. Said, I don't want to talk to anybody about any blankety blank Florida football right now. And he said, when you start losing to directional Florida schools, you got a big blankety blank problem. So I just leave it at that.
Yeah, to elaborate a little more there, I saw I guess it was college football final last night. That loss to South Florida was the first home loss for the Gators against a a team from Florida, not named Miami or Florida State, in the swamp, or at home, I guess probably predating the swamp, back in 1938. So 87 years, in a sense, they had lost to somebody other than the Seminoles or Hurricanes. Pretty remarkable. I know there have been some close calls in there against USF and UCF in recent years, but they have found a way to win those games. But Byron Brown, the Raleigh product, really had a solid game, accounting for over 320 yards of total offense. Temple beat Howard 55-7. They have blown out UMass and now Howard, but it's going to get real for Casey Keeler and the Owls as the Oklahoma Sooners come to the vet. Holy cow! Lincoln Financial this week, so we'll see a lot more about Temple then. Texas State won a shootout at the Alamo Dome in front of over 45,000 against the Roadrunners, 43-36. Navy beat UAB 38-24. North Texas won a thriller up in Kalamazoo over Western Michigan 33-30 in overtime. You also had Tulsa losing 21-14 out in Las Cruces, New Mexico, to the New Mexico State Aggies. FAU beat FAMU 56-14. So Zach Kitley getting his first win, guiding that Florida Atlantic program. Memphis beat Georgia State 38-16. Tulane went on the road and had to grind out, win a thriller against South Alabama 33-31. Rice lost the crosstown battle to Houston 35-9. Army, the Black Knights, bouncing back after that upset by Tarleton State and West Point, defeating Kansas State 24-21, scoring 10 points in the game's final quarter. North Carolina beat Charlotte 20-7, and there you have the American Conference scoreboard for week 2 of college football. Any major takeaways there?
I'll give you one takeaway, and it's probably going to piss off some folks in the football facility, but I got a kid, a young man that I coached in high school, and he was on the Roseville coaching staff when Mr. Brown was the quarterback. And I'll just say this. This is a few years ago, obviously, but we didn't put a whole lot of effort in recruiting him. And this is an East Carolina graduate who's telling me this. And so, those things I believe are being corrected right now. And that gives me more hope for the future and the depth of our roster and the quality of the player of our roster, not only from Georgia, Florida, Ohio, Virginia, the Tidewater area, but also from North Carolina. And so I had a long conversation with Coach Wednesday here in town, and he just really stressed how he was disappointed being an ECU alum that Mr. Brown wasn't recruited harder by East Carolina and more attention was paid, because he probably would have come and been empowered. I'll just leave it at that.
Yep. I definitely did not have that connection that you had and all that information, but I was wondering and how aggressive, if any, recruitment was of Byron Brown when we were having some of the quarterback issues between post
head scratcher
Taylor's era and go ahead. So I dropped you there for a moment. Other Virginia, the ECU series, and then another score of interest. I referenced it earlier. Last year, it seemed as though Oklahoma State was parting. Made some comments about Morgan having $40 million, which then proceed to go to Eugene and get beat 69-3. So, any scores as we wrap up this episode of the show? Anything that stood out around college football?
No, I just say from an American perspective, week one, the turnarounds from some of our teams from week one to week two shows that we've got our work cut out for us the rest of the year. So one of the main things I just want to continue to harp on is let's do our job as fans and our part and support the team. But it's not going to get easier as the year progresses, obviously, for us. But some of these scores that are happening around the nation just show the transfer portal, the fluidity and liquidity of rosters creates uncertainty till about week 5 or 6. And I feel like we can start judging our football team in a really specific manner once we play that process, that row from BYU to Army to Tulane. That's going to tell us a lot about our ball club.
2 final thoughts before we wrap up this edition, and that is down through the years, Virginia Tech and East Carolina, very similar programs. They were, even after getting into the ACC, signed a 9-game deal with us, home and home, and then games in Charlotte mixed in. And then, of course, Whit Babcock and the current administration made the decision to buy their way out of that and cancel that series. And that was frustrating, to say the least, and just the circumstances under which that occurred in 2018. So it did not break my heart to see Vandy go into Blacksburg and score 34 second-half points and beat the Hokies 44-20 yesterday. And then, lastly, BYU, the Pirates' opponent 2 weeks from now. The Cougars improved to 2-0 with a 27-3 win over ACC foe Stanford. And BYU has allowed just a total of 14 net rushing yards, -5 against Portland State. And I understand it's Portland State, but then only 19 to Stanford. So need to continue to see that ground game progress, and Pirates will need to have some semblance of a rushing attack against BYU 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, I love the Virginia Tech score. I'll just leave it at that. I would not pull for Virginia Tech or the folks in Chapel Hill if the world depended on it. I just have really strong feelings about it. It has nothing to do with their fans, et cetera, how they cut that series off. And so I used to pull for ODU every time they played them. I also hope OD would whip their tails up and down the field. And sometimes it happened, which made me super happy. And I'll leave it at that, Bubba.
Yeah, people don't know how deep-rooted the thing in North Carolina.
Yep. It matters. It matters. We took care of Virginia Tech when it was time to take care of them, and they wouldn't take care of us when it was time to take care of us. So you know what? Don't let a door hit you in the ass on the way out, Virginia Tech. I could care less.
Well said. Well said.
I'm losing you.
Pirate walk. The first Pirate walk of the season. You got me now?
Yeah, I got you now. I got to drop in a second, bud.
Okay.
I know you're going to cut this out, but
Got you. All right.
Yeah.
Follow us on X at Blackbeard Alley. Follow us on Instagram at Blackbeard's Alley. And until next time, when we have our Coastal Carolina preview show with Joe Katz of the Coastal Carolina broadcast team, I'm Bubba Rosenbaum for Jason Tyndall. And as always, go Pirates.
Go Pirates.
And it's purple all night long in Eastern North Carolina.